Hi, in today's podcast, we're going to be looking at why you should be moving surveys online when you can. There's some obvious reasons, but this podcast is really about some of the less obvious reasons that perhaps aren't given enough consideration. So stay tuned to find out more. Hi, I'm Phil Hearn, and in today's podcast, we're going to be looking at the reasons why you should be giving perhaps even more thought to bringing surveys online. Now, there's some very obvious reasons, and there's even some current reasons at the moment for bringing surveys online. But this is going to look a little bit deeper at some of the less obvious reasons and some of the opportunities that online surveys give you that paper surveys don't give you, or certainly don't give you with quite the same ease. So let's take a look at some of the things. Well, the reason, if you like, online has exploded and taken over in many countries in the world, although I should say in many of the countries in Asia Pacific where we work quite a bit, it's still perhaps only 50% and less. But what are the reasons? Well, the obvious reason are speed and cost, and they're hard to argue against those two obvious reasons. And I think some people see that as a negative, or they put a negative spin on that in some cases, but they're very persuasive arguments because it means that surveys can be turned around incredibly quickly. I've seen Ipsos this week advertise that they're offering a 6-hour turnaround service. This is somewhat quicker than some of the turnarounds that have been offered even up to recently. So speed is really important. It means we can get data to people who want results from surveys quickly, but cost, of course, is equally important. Online surveys can be carried out much more cheaply than face-to-face interviews. And during these difficult times during COVID, that's obviously very topical. It's hard to do face-to-face interviews now, or if not impossible in many countries, and online offers an option, and if you like, in some countries by necessity, stuff has had to go online now. So speed and cost are obvious, and I think it's easy to be negative about that as well, but you know, if you can bring down the price of market research, it also opens up new buyers to the business that perhaps couldn't afforded research in the past. They now can have a budget where they can get some important research and feedback that wasn't available. And you can see that through the explosion of customer feedback surveys now, which have perhaps been around for a while now, but they're pretty common now, and that's because many companies can get feedback on their products or their services at a fairly reasonable price and give them value information so that they can improve their products and services. But I want to look a bit deeper than that. They're the obvious reasons. Let's look a little bit deeper at some of the things. And I think probably the last point I'm going to come to today in the 3 points I'm going to focus on is data, because I do believe that data is becoming more and more important in market research. I'll explain why I think that's true a little bit later in this podcast. So let's look at a couple of other reasons first why online offers something that perhaps face-to-face doesn't offer. Let's look at the topic, first of all, of perhaps respondent access and convenience to respondents. Now, one thing I like about online surveys, I had one recently for the market research industry, was I could actually complete that survey when I wanted to. I chose to do it on my phone in a quiet moment when I had 10 minutes to spare, and I willingly completed that survey. If somebody had perhaps called me on a telephone while I was working, that might not have been convenient, and a face-to-face interview probably wouldn't have been practical or affordable. It was to get some fast feedback from people working within the market research industry. And that convenience, I think, is becoming more and more important. People are getting more and more comfortable, if you like, with carrying out communications and transactions online. Again, COVID has perhaps pushed that a little bit further, but people are now generally, and it's not, of course, true in all cases, and there are some perhaps some difficulties with perhaps the older population, but people are generally now comfortable with using their phones to communicate, whether that's to order something online, to buy something online, or send some feedback, as in the case of a questionnaire. So that's one real benefit. And I think there's some other benefits attached to that when respondents are online. I think there's a greater propensity to be honest, and I know the doubters on the other side, well, yes, but cheating's also easier because they can tick any answers they want, and that's less easy if there's an interviewer standing there. Well, that might be true, and I know psychologists have looked at that, but it's pretty easy to build checks into your questionnaire to make sure people aren't making up answers or just clicking on random answers and answering a questionnaire more quickly than is reasonable. So those sorts of things can be, if you like, ironed out and picked up, and those sorts of respondents can be excluded quite easily. And of course, another thing we find is that there's one less step in the process. So there's less scope for human error. And I've heard the argument that, well, interviewers, of course, are very good at their work. They're more used to filling in questionnaires, so their error rate is less. But I think if the more steps you take out of process, you're also removing things. So that data that's collected on a paper questionnaire is keyed in by somebody. They are going to make some mistakes when they key that data in. If it's logically correct, it will still carry on through the data entry system. So there's a step that's been added. Somebody else is going to perhaps process that in another piece of software to calculate the results from that survey. If it's all built into the same platform, that can be automated. So yes, there's some arguments that accuracy might be a bit lower if a respondent's doing it themselves, but there's also some pluses the other way, and I think on balance they cancel each other out at least. So let's look at another topic now. What else is easier and better about online surveys that's perhaps not quite so obvious? Well, I think ease of administering the survey is quite an important point, and it's something, again, that's not thought about perhaps as much. Changing a paper questionnaire is quite a cumbersome process, particularly if a project's already gone into field. It would mean reissuing questionnaires or issuing interviewers with instructions to add a missed out question or whatever it might be. With an online survey, one can add a question, correct a question, do whatever's needed pretty much in a few moments, and that then is redeployed pretty much instantaneously. So it's very, very easy to administer changes so that anything that goes wrong, and things do go wrong, can be handled very, very quickly, easily, with the minimum of effort and with a minimum of disruption, if you like, to the process of collecting data. And of course, under that category of administration, I would say things like the geography of a country becomes less of a problem. Yes, the argument might be that usage of mobile phones in perhaps remote areas might be lower, particularly in some countries. But again, getting a survey out to a remote area is not difficult, and it doesn't matter where respondents are. You can even conduct surveys worldwide very, very easily, which would be quite a logistical problem if you've got a paper survey. And even with CATI, that becomes a problem as well, because you'll need local people dialing that possibly in local languages and so on. And again, questionnaires can be made available in multiple languages very easy. So there's some real benefits in terms of geography and administration when you're conducting an online survey. Now, I said in my introduction that the last point I want to talk about is data, and it's one of those things that I feel quite passionate about. Data's always been at the core of market research, but I don't think data's necessarily, or the way that data's managed and processed, has necessarily been at the core of the way that market research agencies treat it. It tends to be done in a back room, and it's, if you like, a process that has to take place. And that's not to say that it's always been done with stringent safeguards for accuracy and so on and checking. But I think data's getting a bigger and bigger role in market research. And I think there's a sort of, a changing attitude to data, and market research has not quite yet got far enough, in my view, in realizing its potential, if you like, and how it can be the core of what we deliver as a business. So once you've got data online, it's very easy to connect it let's say, to an online dashboard. That's something that becomes a lot easier. Now, that's not to say if you've got survey data from a paper or a CATI survey, it can't be uploaded and put onto an online dashboard. But it's, again, another process that's eliminated, and it can be done automatically. And what's more, it can, if it's a benefit to the client, be conducted in real time, so that data as it's collected is instantly available online. I'll give you an example of let's say you're running a survey for a car dealership and you want to check the quality of the servicing that's being carried out at each of your outlets around a country. Well, that can be something that can be fed back instantly. So if data is collected online, that information can be automatically processed. It can be available online to look at analysis. Anybody who's perhaps dissatisfied with a service can get routed through to a call center so that someone can deal with that dissatisfaction very, very quickly. If that's been collected in traditional ways, that whole process gets dealt with in batch, probably isn't a process for, let's say, 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe even a month. The whole immediacy of taking that data and being able to use it, if you like, is lost or negated to a great extent. And that's really where online starts to gather more and more power and more opportunities, both for research agencies and the buyers of research. Once data's online, it becomes much easier to feed in other data. And by that, I mean client sales data, targets that they may have, KPIs, all sorts of other business data can be merged in and shown alongside market research data. Whereas if you're producing a PowerPoint presentation, that becomes a cut and paste operation to a greater extent. So the opportunities are there, if data's online, to plug in other data and give to the buyers of research much more powerful information, showing your valuable research data that you've collected alongside other things that are really at the core of their business. And that then elevates, if you like, the position and the value of market research. It allows connection to CRM systems, for example. So it means that as survey data is coming in, some of that can be fed back to businesses' CRM systems. So again, they're getting, if you like, added value from research surveys that are being connected. And software is getting ever more connected. I think this is one of the things that people in software know about. There are things called APIs, which are application programming interfaces that connect different bits of software together. People in marketing know this, that you could connect, for example, your mail shots and the feedback from mail shots through one system that coordinates that. And that might be using different bits of software, but they're all getting connected together behind the scenes to produce, if you like, a workflow that takes things from beginning to end and maximizes the potential of that data. And market research needs to be in that business. Market research needs to be connecting its data and the data that's fed into it and out of it in a smooth way, so that APIs can take that data and use it in the way that buyers of research want. So we're not just handing over a report at the end of our surveys always, we're putting data into a dashboard and making that data available to go into any systems that people want. And indeed, I was quite encouraged this week that I've always been a promoter of the ASC's SSS standard, which makes it easy to transfer surveys from one piece of software to another within the market research industry. And that's been something that's been around now for over 20 years, nearer 30 years, I believe. And that makes it easy for software companies that adhere to the SSS standard to move data from one software platform to another. And this week there's been an announcement there's an API under development by the ASC called TS API or SSS API, and that will open up market research data to other business systems and vice versa, so that they can access data from market research. Now that's in its infancy, but once that grows, in terms of a system that can be used, that's going to again offer greater opportunity for market research to integrate with other business data and really become of more value. So there are endless possibilities. I don't think this is the end of it either. I think this is the beginning of a new era, if you like, in terms of market research data being more valuable. I think there's a real opportunity here, and this is one of the reasons I think that online really has greater potential, if you like, than some of the older forms of market research. And it's not to say that where it's a necessity to collect survey data face to face or on the telephone or via other means, it doesn't mean it precludes it from that, but by being online, you're opening up opportunities that just that bit more quickly, if you like, and easily, that perhaps paper doesn't allow. So it's still possible, of course, to upload data into a database so that, if you like, these APIs of the future can connect and offer market research more. But doing surveys online just makes that one less step and one step easier, and produce, if you like, real-time analysis and reporting and feedback. So there's the end of my podcast today. We're very much in this business. We partnered with a company, and we're promoting the CYS platform as a way of going from just survey data to being able to transition that data into online reporting systems, pulling in data from other places, such as sales data and other business data, that gives market research data a bit more power. So thank you for joining me. If you've got any questions, please feel free to contact me or send me an email. My email address is phil.hearn@mrdcsoftware.com. Thanks for joining me, and I hope it's been interesting to you.